This June, me and my team headed back to New Hampshire to visit PorcFest, an annual festival for libertarians, free staters, and pretty much anyone who wants to live their life free on their own terms. It's an amazing event filled with all sorts of interesting people. This is one of the conversations I had there. Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. Hey guys, this is a spontaneously emerging conversation with the movers and shakers of the New Hampshire Mises Caucus, New Hampshire Libertarian Party, and I guess the LNC National, the Libertarian Party at a national level. So welcome.
Thanks,
Thank
Matt.
you. Good to be here.
Thanks for having us.
I wanted to talk about this thing that we're all talking about in the libertarian movement, the Mises Caucus. And you guys just got back from Reno, Nevada, and everybody knows by now that the Mises Caucus and the organizers kind of ran the table, and they replaced the entire leadership, and they replaced the Libertarian National Committee. Let's start with just a little bit of background of each of you, and I'll start with you, Robley.
I'm Nolan.
Oh, Nolan.
Yeah.
Do you mind changing your name? But
No, it's not a problem at all.
Nolan, so you've been in New Hampshire and running the Libertarian Party here for a long time. What's your story?
I've been chair for about, now it's probably a little over a year. I've moved to New Hampshire about 20 years ago. I'm a mass transplant. I moved here, I know that you're probably familiar with the FSP since you're here. I did not move with the FSP. I moved independently. I knew of it, but not with them. And small business owner. Part of the reason I actually wanted to be more involved in politics was the response to the COVID regime and everything that went down. So that's really what kind of forced me into it, and that's what made me take up that role. In all honesty, I sat as chair for more than a year and a half. I started off as vice chair. We had the coup last year, which I'm sure you're aware of. Everyone was thrown out of the party. Once we kind of got that squared away, I ascended to chair, and here I am.
Robley.
Well, I moved to New Hampshire in 2003. I was an early Free State Project participant, and what happened in the past couple of years, both with COVID, it's a similar story to Nolan's, both with COVID and the coup, made me realize that it was time to get more heavily involved in the Libertarian Party, just to right the wrongs that were done in the LP and to work on making sure the COVID responses don't happen again, at least as much as we can do in New Hampshire. So
Yeah.
That's what really woke me up to.
This story sounds quite familiar.
Yes.
Ben.
Yeah, so I was actually born in New Hampshire, but my parents moved to Maine when I was an infant. But I moved back about 6 years ago, and not with the Free State Project specifically, but when the Mises Caucus first started getting organized in late 2019, I guess, they asked me if I would be the organizer for the state of New Hampshire, so I agreed to do that. And in 2020, I went to the the New Hampshire State Convention, which was a presidential election year, so we had the candidates and debates and so forth. And I didn't know anyone ahead of time. I found four people who were sympathetic with the Mises Caucus. The following year, we had started to get more organized and had a couple of meetups, and I think we had about 35 people who were Mises Caucus, which was more than the total number of delegates at the 2020 convention, even in a presidential year. But we didn't have a supermajority, we had a majority. And then this past year, we had probably 55 out of 58 of the delegates, and it was the largest state convention since, at least in the last 20 years. So that's kind of how it's grown.
So why do you guys think that the Mises Caucus is bringing people out?
Well, I think people really respond to the message. We're very strong on anti-war. We're very strong on localism and decentralization from Washington. We're very strong on the non-intervention the drug war, the Fed, basically all the things that Ron Paul stood
Right.
for. So I think that message resonates with people. But honestly, personally, I think the main reason for our success is, at least here in New Hampshire, we have such a strong community. And when we have a meetup, we'll have 40 or 45 people show up from all over the state. And
Right.
it's just like you're with your family. Like, we have the best time. And everyone's happy to be together. And I honestly, I think that sense of community is really what gave us the energy to, be able to accomplish what we've done. So.
Yeah, I love hearing the C word, because libertarians are infamously individualistic,
Right.
and once in a while we fight with each other, but there's a real sense of power that comes from actually getting together and agreeing on a couple things that really matter, and maybe agreeing to disagree on all the other stuff, because social movements start with community.
That's right. And if you're, this is more of an FSP than LP oriented thing I'm about to say, but if you're the kind of classical, weaponized autiste, as Michael Malice says, libertarian, and you move to New Hampshire, you may find yourself with the largest community of friends that you've had in your life and ever experienced. The community is very strong here. I mean, just as you look around, Porkfest, this is kind of a microcosm of what we live with every day. And I say microcosm in spite of the fact that this is huge.
Yeah.
But the interactions you'll have as a libertarian in New Hampshire on a daily basis are different than what you'll see anywhere else in the U.S.
I remember when I became a libertarian when I was 13. I read the liner notes on a Rush album that were dedicated to the genius of Ayn Rand. I'm sure other people have a similar story, but it took me many years to discover that there was anybody else in the world that agreed with me. And I ended up at a Foundation for Economic Education conference, and it was like magical. I'm like, wow, there's 20 of us.
Yeah.
We can change the world. But I imagine you guys gather 40, 50 people every time you get together in a like, it's not like this is a massively populated state either.
Right.
Yeah, and that's another advantage we have, is just being a small state. We can have people from all over the state at a single meetup where, I talked to an organizer in North Dakota a few months ago, and she's like, well, I'm 4 hours from the next city. And
Yeah.
so that, that's a challenge that it does make it easier here for us. So.
He took your
Sorry.
talking point.
Yeah.
Way to go. So there's a significant overlay between Mises Caucus and I would call them Ron Paul kids, young people that were turned on in 2008, 2012. Maybe they're not all kids, but were you turned on by Ron Paul, or do you precede that?
Ron Paul.
Ron Paul.
Actually, I came from the left, so I voted for somebody in 2008, but Ron Paul, it made sense to me. I was looking, it just spoke to me, and it sent me down that rabbit hole.
Was it the anti-war message?
Yeah, I've always been anti-war, and there seems like there's no party now that's really anti-war anymore. That's kind of what's appealing about the Mises Caucus as well. It's vehemently anti-war.
So a big part of the takeover was an insistence that the message coming from libertarians wasn't bold enough, and I'll start. I want to get into that, but I want to echo something that you said about the COVID regime, and I don't know about you guys, but I was shocked at how quickly Americans just laid down.
It was scary. And there was a big opportunity for the LP to be the vanguard of fighting against that. And just with messaging saying this is overreach, this is violating the Constitution, this is violating every law or regulation that gives government authority. And you're right, it was alarming that there wasn't more pushback, but it was from the people, but it was also alarming that the Libertarian Party didn't fight that, and in fact tacitly supported it, I would argue.
Yeah.
So that was a big turning point, I think, for a lot
I
of
was
people.
shocked. I was on this big, I'm forgetting the name of the app, but for a hot minute there was this app where we had these massive conversations amongst libertarians. It died quickly, but there was maybe 300-400 big L libertarians on this call, and my suggestion, this is like early 2020, it was like, this is our opportunity.
Right.
You know, really radical principles like we should be allowed to leave our house.
Right.
We should be allowed to work at our job.
Operate our businesses.
Operate our business. We should have control over our own bodies, particularly when the government's mandating that you inject something into it.
Right.
And we should be allowed to speak our minds. Like, I realize these are super fringy, radical ideas.
They were at the time, apparently. Yes.
Everybody was scared to death, and I get that. But I did think that libertarians would sort of instinctually, immediately band together and fight that.
You would think that would be the case, but we had such messaging coming out of LPNH before as wear a mask.
Right.
So it's like when, like I said, I'm a small business owner. When this whole thing came down, I was like, what am I going to do? Like, is this going to affect my business? They started shutting stuff down, and I was like, I don't know. I was hoping that like at least somebody would stand up. There was nobody standing up, and then the messaging from my party is wear a mask, and I was like, this is your time to like dig your feet into the just make a stand, and they're just rolling over. So it's kind of
so was that kind of a catalyst? Because obviously the Mises Caucus precedes lockdowns and the government overreach on the pandemic. But do you think that frustration that there wasn't that voice was a key part of your success in Reno?
Oh, definitely. And I think a lot of us feel like if you can't get that right, we probably don't have enough in common to work together.
Yeah.
It just seems so blatant and obvious that, as you said, this is the time to take a stand, no matter how unpopular it is. And if you fail to see that, then probably it's not going to be a good working relationship. So I think that did really galvanize a lot of people.
Yeah. So that, I suppose that's part of the message, and that's kind of one of those rage against the machine things where at least now a lot of people are waking up to the human damage that's been done over the last 2 years because of all these things that were supposedly for our own good. But let's talk about the broader message. Like if you guys want to turn on the next generation, what's the pitch? You're not just going to quote Ludwig von Mises, are you?
No, I think the message has to be that people can own their own lives, own their own, have responsibility for their own success, not rely on the government to put people into positions based on the fear of the day, whether it's COVID or nuclear war or whatever. That the government is an entity of the people, ideally. We obviously hope it goes away, but to the extent we have one, take control, get involved, state your positions, fight for what matters to you. And it's really shocking how little it takes to influence a state when you get involved. And it's very easy to say it doesn't matter, I don't need to get involved, I probably can't change anything anyway. I mean, Michael Heiss took over the messaging of libertarianism and then succeeded in taking over the party. It's not that he took over the party, it's that he re-engaged the messaging of the party. And it's a very young crowd. I mean, I'm not the demographic of the Mises Caucus, but Michael brought back the messaging that matters.
Shout out to the old guys, by the way.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
We still matter.
That's right. But Michael re-engaged the messaging of libertarianism, and then that's what led to the takeover of the party. People saw that there is actual libertarianism available, and it can be done within the framework of the party. And here we are today after Reno.
And I think, one event at a time, if it's COVID or if it's a 20-year war in Afghanistan or if it's inflation at least 8.5% annually, regular people are going to start to see this thing is not your friend and it is not helping you, and we need to figure out a way to organize society in a better way. And we believe that the obvious solution is localism and breaking away from Washington, D.C., and I think that's a message that can resonate with a lot of people. The further this thing goes. So.
Yeah. Nolan, how are you going to convert every single person in New Hampshire to libertarianism?
Well, first of all, invite them to come to Porkfest. You know, you have I think people have this attitude. They don't know that libertarians. They're floating around. I mean, I was one of them. They're floating around. They have these certain ideals, and they think they have. You know, you latch onto a party because of anti-war, so now you're left, or you latch on to gun rights, so now you're right. But there's so much in between, and that's it's letting people know that single issues are great if you want to work together with somebody on that, but like we're more than single issues. It's waking up these kids to let them know that we're here. We're not, we believe in self-ownership. We believe in anti-war, and it's not just a political party. It's almost a philosophy.
It strikes me, we were talking about the COVID regime, and it strikes me that the centralizers, the power mongers, are just getting started with dictating every aspect of our lives. And one of the reasons that we so strongly opposed vaccine mandates was the infrastructure of social control that creates, the Chinese social credit system and all that. So it strikes me that it's going to become more vivid, and it's not going to be left versus right. It's going to be centralized control dictating how you live your lives, treating you kind of like farm animals, right? Exactly. We're gonna vax you today, and we're gonna herd you in this direction. We're gonna determine whether or not your job is worthy of you having a job. And the alternative is, yes, it's individualism, but what you said earlier, I think, is almost more important. Localism, bottom up, community problem solving, cooperation, and in a sense that you can, working with your neighbors, control your life in opposition to these faceless bureaucrats that want to control your life for you.
And it's a better life. It's not just a practical matter, but re-engaging with your community. We've talked about that a lot, and finding people that agree with you or not, but you can work together and live a good life. It's more than just fighting the government goes away and okay, now what do we do? It's building up a community of people that can work together and bring back values of helping each other and cooperating, doing voluntary activities, all the core libertarian principles. I think being a libertarian sounds like an exotic, weird thing, but if you talk to people about how they would like to live their lives, the principles aren't really radical.
Yeah,
it's a very ordinary way to live.
I like to hear that because there's this frustration that I have with libertarians. We're very good at trashing the Fed and yelling about the federal government. We struggle sometimes to talk about this beautiful thing that liberty is.
Right.
And it's not, am I being detained? It's something very
am
rich.
I prospering with my fellow humans?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what happened in Reno. Was everybody in Reno?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
And we'll go to the new elected official, because we're going to start complaining about you, I assume, at some point.
No, you should complain to me, and then if I don't engage in good faith, then you can complain about me. Yeah.
So give us a download of the Libertarian Convention. What happened and what's going to happen?
Well, without imputing motives to people who were not Mises supporters, I think the convention was an exercise in diplomacy on a lot of sides. Maybe diplomacy is the wrong word, of politicking on a lot of sides. I think there was definitely a concerted effort to maintain the status quo. So there were a lot of things that happened in convention that, although were maybe obstructionist in behavior. They were within the framework of how we operate a convention.
Dilatory.
Yeah, dilatory was the word of the day. But there was resistance to what was an obvious tide of takeover.
Yeah.
So we went through a lot of that. There were a lot of vote counts, for instance, that took, that were not efficient, we'll say, or timely. But the overall mood of the convention was very positive and very excited. I think the majority of the people there looked at this as a turning point where we can make the Libertarian Party libertarian again, a phrase we heard a lot. And I think there was the opportunity for the old guard, if we want to call them that, to present their case, to make their arguments, to try to win votes. And in the end, they didn't have a persuasive argument, and Mises, took the day.
Was it was the turnout substantially higher because of Mises' recruitment?
I would say so. I don't know actual numbers to quote that. I don't know if you do.
I don't know the numbers off the top of my head.
No.
It was said that it was higher than most conventions.
Yeah, and there was definitely more excitement because of Mises and among Mises supporters we turned up. There's an old saying, the party belongs to those who turn up. I can't remember who said it, but Mises Caucus were the ones who turned up.
Yeah. It struck me that, and by the way, I stayed out of it. I let you all figure it out, and I've decided a long time ago that I'm not going to fight with my friends, and these sort of party fights are for younger people than myself. But it struck me that if people are angry at people participating in a political party for turning out more people to participate in a political party, they're probably missing the point
yes.
of being a political organization, because whatever you guys have accomplished now, the challenge is like, how do we make it tenfold?
Right.
Whatever happened in Reno, how do we make it 100-fold? How do we turn on people that have no idea who Ludwig von Mises is, who probably have never heard of the non-aggression principle or any of that stuff that we love to talk about after a few beers. The real question is, can we tolerate a massive community of people that is not going to agree on everything, but just on a couple of really important things?
And I think that's a challenge with fine-tuning the messaging and the platform, and there's been some activity. There was activity at convention for that, to make a strong libertarian platform that does incorporate the things that are seen as important to libertarians.
Yeah.
I mean, to go with what you were saying, we can't expect to grow the party in the general public if we can't grow attendance at convention amongst our natural constituency of libertarians. So there's platform work to be done to have strong messaging that promotes libertarianism, but that acknowledges the fact that there are a broad spectrum of people and a broad spectrum of views in the Libertarian Party. I think we've been successful in the 3 weeks or whatever doing that.
Let me ask all of you to answer this question. Is it possible to attract both disaffected Republicans and conservatives and disaffected Democrats, former, this is an extreme example, but you may have noticed that there's a lot of former leftists that are horrified at the authoritarianism coming out of the new progressivism. Can we reach all the way across that spectrum, or do we have to focus on one or the other? And I'll start with.
I think we can. I mean, I think it's ripe for the picking, actually. I mean, I was fighting against my school board during this whole COVID thing about masks, and my wife and I were probably the only libertarians in that whole group. Most of them were probably constitutional conservatives for the most part, some just regular run-of-the-mill Republicans, but they're starting to see things differently. A lot of them were thin blue line, blue or die people, and they didn't think that the police would arrest people at school board meetings for not wearing masks. And just in my school district, they did it twice. So they're starting to see that, this image that they have of these people that they hold in high regard is that it's an image, and they serve the state. So they're coming around. And if we, there's a lot of people just like that, and probably on the left side as well, but it's just going to be for different reasons. So it's just reaching them, getting our message to them, and getting them over here, because once you start swimming in it, like, there's no going back.
I follow a lot of self-identified former leftist moms who are so pissed off about how their kids are being treated by the government schools that they've been red-pilled in the literal sense, not in a political sense, that they're like, wow, the system doesn't give a damn about my kids. I think that's a huge opportunity. That's not a right of center thing. That's coming from a very different perspective.
That's getting to primal concerns of parents taking care of their kids, and when parents feel that the state schools are harming their children, it doesn't matter which party they identify with.
Yeah.
That's hitting close to home. And we do have an opportunity as libertarians to reach even a hardcore Democratic constituency that's saying the state schools have now gone in a direction that is hurting my family. Your question about hitting disaffected on both sides, it's going to depend on why they're disaffected. Economics is a more esoteric kind of reason to get involved with libertarianism until you're hitting 10% inflation, and then Austrian economics gets more interesting.
Yeah.
But some of these things, like COVID reactions, hit very close to home very quickly, and we can pull those people in with good messaging and good policies.
Yeah, this is like Ron Paul's moment to explain why we should have ended the Fed,
right,
and how the government has stolen from working people by inflating the currency, and unfortunately that argument doesn't work until you have 10% inflation.
Right. That's right.
And people are looking at their grocery cart and saying, wow.
Yeah, so I think that that issue appeals to everyone. Nolan's originally came from the left. I originally came from the right. I was a George W. Bush Republican until 2008 with Ron Paul. But so I think, in our experience, I think I'd say it's almost an equal number from left and right. And, on the schools specifically, our friend Carlin Borisenko, who's here in New Hampshire, she's here at PorcFest, she found out about the Mises Caucus and got involved. And she's originally coming from the left. She was a lifelong Democrat, and her issue is the schools. I mean, she has the public schools, the CRT, all the mandates and parental control and all of that. That's her thing, and she's coming from the left. So I think there are lots of opportunities on both sides to pull disaffected people.
I actually don't understand why the teachers' unions so aggressively jumped the shark on this, because they inadvertently demonstrated to parents that weren't paying attention just how little they cared about their kids, and then they're home, and then they get to see the crazy curriculum that's being, and it's not just curriculum, it's the whole process of just this regimented 45 minutes, this and this, and this is not how you teach children.
But they've been doing this for generations, and even conservatives haven't cared. I mean, the private school movement, the homeschool movement, has been a fringe movement for for longer than my lifetime, and so now I think that the reason was they just didn't believe that anyone could challenge them.
They thought they had total control.
Yeah, they thought that no one, there was no risk to their power.
Yeah.
And then people start showing up to the school board meetings, and they're not interested in this stuff.
You mean domestic terrorists?
Yes, exactly.
Those.
I was worried I was going to be on a no-fly list when I went to Reno. There was like a little bit of fear, because I did interfere with those school boards, and there was some altercations there. So
yeah,
peaceful, of course. But.
So this is part of my theory, and I could go. I just figured out what white-pilled and black-pilled mean, and my wife would accuse me of being really dark and despondent over the last 2 years. Like, it's over, we're screwed, we're never going to get our liberty back. But but I also tend to be a short-term pessimist and a long-term optimist. And I remember all the way back to 2008 when all of the Beltway conservatives and libertarians, with the exception of a few, were in the tank on the Wall Street bailout. And I thought it was over. Like, this is it. We're never going to bounce back. But then there was a revolution that was the Ron Paul revolution, the Tea Party revolution. Those things sort of mashed up and merged to a certain extent. And I think we're at that point today where people are going to be like, something's wrong.
Right.
And they see it in their schools, they see it in our foreign policy, they see it in the cost of everything they consume, not just gas. So this is our moment, isn't it?
It's definitely our moment, and like the things you said, when inflation goes up so high that people are going to have to worry about whether they can afford the gas to drive to their jobs. And that happens when 2 years ago gas was at historic low prices. It's going to make people think that, okay, there's something going on here that I don't understand, but this doesn't feel natural. All the oil in the ground didn't suddenly go away. The refineries didn't suddenly cease to exist. This has to be an effect of some government policy. I think if we can push that message, Ron Paul's message that government is going to interfere with, the economy, make things worse, this is something we can point at that says, okay, Ron said this. Hey, look what happened in the course of 2 years, where suddenly you're running your thermostat at 60 degrees in the winter because you can't afford to buy heating oil anymore.
Yeah.
So it's a good example. It's like an A/B test. We didn't have this before. Now we have it. Government actions brought this. So here we are.
So I always gravitate towards sort of the national big issues, but I want to flip it over and go local, because we're here in New Hampshire. I love this experiment. I've been to the Free State Project's Pork Fest maybe 6 times now, and it gets bigger every time, and it gets more vibrant and diverse. I think it was our good friend, is it Jeffrey Kaufman?
Jeremy.
Kaufman.
Why am I saying Jeffrey?
Close by.
Okay, we'll clean that up in
U.S.
post.
Senator Jeremy.
My
Yes,
senior mod.
future Senator Kaufman.
Yeah, future Senator Jeremy Kaufman. But he pointed out in a tweet that you have acid-taking nudists and church groups coexisting in the same community, which is not an exaggeration, I suspect.
It's absolutely not an exaggeration.
I'm happy that we're not 2 rows over, because when we had Dave Smith on the show last year, we had a very naked dude walking past the thing behind us, and
Well, don't jinx us.
yeah. Well, who knows? Who knows what'll happen? But I sort of love that dynamic that everybody gets along, and this is the Free State Project vision of things. But you're head of the LP here in New Hampshire. What are your priorities? Like how are you guys going to make New Hampshire a better place to live?
Well, one, we LP did not have a good relationship with the FSP prior to this. There was almost like a schism. And I really was hoping to kind of heal that issue and merge the two, because we have people that are uprooting their lives, leaving family, leaving everything behind to move here for freedom. And those are the people that I want at LPNH. Those are the people that are willing to fight for it. Those are the people that believe in it. Those are the people that are going to show up. Those are the people that are going to put in time. And that's really what I'm hoping for, is tapping them into LPNH and getting them active. Obviously I want everybody. I want locals here. People that lived in New Hampshire, people of the Free State, here. But this is basically a natural resource that I really want to be involved with.
So and one of the first things I did when I was organizing the Mises Caucus here was I met with Jeremy Kaufman. He's on the board of the Free State Project. Dennis Pratt was one of the very first people I met at the first convention I went to. So immediately started networking with these Free State Project people and saying, look, we would like to be allies. I mean, we have everything in common. There's no reason on earth why these organizations shouldn't be able to work together, and that our combined powers and combined efforts have to be better than our individual efforts. So
yeah, we had people in the FSP who were totally disinterested. When I say in the FSP participants is kind of the term of art we use, because FSP is a framework for moving here to engage, to live in a more liberty-oriented way. But we had FSP participants who were totally disinterested in the LP.
Right.
Because the LP messaging, the LP approach wasn't obviously pro-liberty. We have very strong activists in New Hampshire, activists for liberty, who had no interest in being part of the LP. And I think it's too early to have numbers on LP membership increases in New Hampshire as a result of what happened in Reno. But I've talked personally to several people who now I can join. This is a party I can join. And I think if we can keep pushing that message, we can pull in a lot of free staters into the LP and just strengthen what we already have.
So one of the crown jewels of the Free State Project, and all the organizations, I'll use that one, but I realize it's a network of organizations, is the presence of liberty legislatures within the Republican Party at the state level. What do you do about that? Your job is to get libertarians elected, but there are libertarians who identify as Republicans being libertarian in the State House.
I mean, yes, I would say my job is to get liberty or freedom. And I mean, if it's happening one way or another, I mean, if we're moving the needle in the right direction, that's what I'd like to see. We talk about coalitions, not directly a coalition, but if it's going to help, why would I want to not help? If me doing something's going to have a negative effect, even if it's for the right reasons, is that really beneficial? I would say no.
Yeah, and we're very self-conscious about not interfering, not opposing the good liberty Republicans, of whom there are a great many in the state legislature in New Hampshire. So,
what about nonpartisan races? We talk about localism. Do you guys think that some of the best opportunities in state are school boards and county councils, that kind of thing?
Yeah, and the Mises Caucus specifically, I think last year they gave away about $30,000 to specific candidates around the country, and they will only financially support candidates at the county level and lower. So sheriff, mayor, school board,
budget committee,
things like that. So from the Mises Caucus standpoint, that is absolutely, a major part of our strategy.
Is that a new project, or do you already have success stories at the local level?
We still are kind of just starting to get organized.
We had a few things going on, but we're moving forward at a great rate.
Yeah. So we have a couple of candidates lined up, I think, that are interested in different local races, and then we have our governor candidate and our U.S. Senate candidate. So.
And you've occasionally run like legislative initiatives.
Yeah, we did introduce, or we provided a Defend the Guard bill to one of our allies in the legislature.
Explain to people what that is, because some people I discover don't. It's really a cool issue, and some people don't know what that means.
Yeah, I mean, I think even nationally, and Robley might comment on this, but I think Defend the Guard is one of the highest priorities now of the new LP and the Mises Caucus. But basically, the Defend the Guard bills would say that the governor may not deploy the National Guard without a congressional declaration of war or an actual invasion of the homeland, which are the constitutional authorizations for war. So it would basically hamstring all of these never-ending regime change, non-declared wars overseas from being able to send the National Guard out. So that's the idea, and it's been, at this point, I'm not an expert specifically on Defend the Guard, but I think it's been introduced in 27 or 29 legislatures already, and I think it's even passed in one state. So yeah, that's an issue that's very important to us, and we think, an example of a local initiative, of a nullification effort that really could have a major impact on national foreign policy.
Yeah, and that was one of the first actions we took in the first LNC meeting in Reno. At the close of convention, we had our first meeting. The Defend the Guard resolution that passed was one of the first courses of business. So it's that important to promote or to support local people against DC federal overreach, which is what Defend the Guard is seeing. This is overreach by the federal government to take the state guard people who signed up to support their local communities and send them off to a war overseas that nobody cares about. So.
Cool. Let's wrap up with this. The main criticism that I've heard at the Mises Caucus that it's a takeover, it's a hostile takeover, and that you guys are an exclusive club, and then that you're going to drive other types of libertarians out of the party. Is that true?
It doesn't have to be a hostile takeover. I mean, we believe that we would like to bring the Ron Paul revolution to the Libertarian Party, and we believe that Ron Paul's vision of liberty should be something that should appeal to anyone who actually believes in liberty. And we can work with people from the left, we can work with people from the right, but we want it to be a party that is truly committed to those principles. And if people are willing to work with us, we are working with a lot of people who have been involved with the LP previously and don't have a problem with what we're doing. So
I mean, we started out, our chair was not Mises Caucus, and we endorsed her. We wanted to work with everybody. We did not, at least in New Hampshire, we didn't start anything. This was a complete shock to us. We did not put this in motion. If you want to say if there was like a hostile feeling, I would say that would be from the opposite side, from my experience.
Well, you actually come from the left, so I feel like you're an example of, because sort of the vibe of the criticisms is that it's a takeover from the right, but I never thought of the Ron Paul coalition as a right thing.
It's a liberty thing.
Right. It's a liberty thing.
Yes, it's not a hostile takeover. It's simply hey, you guys were driving in the wrong direction. We're getting back on track now, and we want you to come with us. But we have to get it going in the right direction. Work for liberty, work to support the principles of liberty, and try to move messaging in politics at large, and just get liberty back on the national agenda, especially after the past few years.
I just remembered another question I want to ask, and we were talking about this before we started, and I think it's an interesting debate and a reasonable one for various types of libertarians. Justin Amash was recently arguing that the only purpose of the Libertarian Party is to elect candidates, otherwise it shouldn't be a party. I have argued, and I've stolen this from Ron Paul's candidacy, that politics, presidential politics in particular, but politics generally, is a cultural soapbox through which you could turn young people on to ideas and values when they're actually paying attention. And I think the view of the Mises Caucus, the way that Angela has spoken of it, is that you want bold messaging, you want to turn people on, you want to build a community. Where are you guys on this debate between electing people and building a community based on liberty?
Well, first off, I think most everyone in the Mises Caucus thinks very highly of Justin Amash. I think that is a tactical disagreement, and we believe that getting 8% of the vote or getting 3% of the vote is not really the focus of what our efforts should be, but that we really do need to change the culture. And so what we need is someone who can get people excited, who can make people think about things in a way that they maybe haven't thought about them before, like Ron Paul did, and can ignite a broader movement that could start to influence the conversation nationally. And that's how we would start moving toward a freer society, not just by focusing on maximizing the number of votes in this election this year. That we just don't think is a sound strategy.
They've been trying to do that for years. And where has it gotten us? I mean, we have to build the culture first, and hopefully, that's everything else will follow.
Yeah, we have to get people excited about liberty and make that the key thing rather than getting votes. Like Nolan said before, if there's a candidate at a local level who might say, I'm a Republican, but they have liberty ideals, that's a person that we all benefit. When that person's in office, we all benefit, even though they don't have the right letter after their name. So I think getting liberty into the discussion, making people understand that what we're living with is not liberty and there's a better way. That's the big message. We're using the Libertarian Party as the main vehicle, the main organizational structure to do that. But liberty is the message, not the party.
And the original founders of the party, people like David Nolan and Murray Rothbard, said specifically that while it is a political party, and so obviously, we're going to run candidates and things like that, that the main goal is not to just instantly start winning elections, but to be a vehicle for introducing people to the ideas. So,
All right, cool. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you very
awesome.
much, Matt.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you very much. That was great.
Thanks, guys.
Guys.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that show, make sure that you like and subscribe. Click the little bell so that you get notifications. And if you consume this via podcast, go wherever you want to go. We're everywhere. Kibbe on Liberty. The revolution starts now.